I want to bring in our CBS News political analyst and former White House chief of staff for President Trump, Reince Priebus. Reince, good to see you. Thank you for joining us. So have you spoken with President Trump?
I recently spoke to him, and he wants to do, I think, what you're all hearing. He wants to make sure all the ballots are counted. I think he wants to make sure that it's fair and it was clean, and he's got people around the country checking into all that. So I think that's the process, and I think that's what the campaign's going to follow.
How would you describe the mood within the White House?
Well, I think, I heard you talking about Arizona. I think that there is a real feeling, and I understand what you said about the last batch. I thought that some of that last batch in Arizona came from Pima County. I could be mistaken, but knowing what's out there, I think there's some confidence on the campaign side that this election in Arizona is going to swing 1,000 or 2,000 votes either way.
But he's losing Pima.
Arizona back in.
He's losing Pima 59-39. The president is. So
True.
You wouldn't want. That's not a good county for him.
No, I understand it. That's why what I said was the reason that last batch may have not been as good as the other batches was that a lot of it was from Pima County. So we're agreeing with each other. But I think getting Arizona back on the map, obviously, psychologically, is going to be very important for the campaign. And if Arizona doesn't come back into play, then you're into canvassing and looking for clerical errors and things like that. And those things can happen. But, it has to be extremely close for, like I'm in the state of Wisconsin, for a machine count reelection, you have to have serious, like mechanical, canvassing type transcription errors that you can find during the canvass. And then the canvass gives you the time to put your affidavits together for the recount.
And let me ask you about that, Reince. Yeah, I noticed you used the phrase clerical errors. Your successor as now chairwoman at the Republican National Committee, Ronna McDaniel, said, "We are not seeing any evidence of widespread fraud." Would you agree with that?
Well, I'm not in the weeds with it, so I'm not a good person to ask. But what I can tell you is there are things like this. For example, I know that in Michigan, I'm not in Michigan right now, but in Michigan, there was things like in Huron County, which, by the way, is like the thumb part of the mitt. They sent in a amount of votes for 45 votes for President Trump. Turns out it was 450. In another neighboring county, they reversed the Trump-Biden number, and it ended up netting Trump 6,000 votes. I mean, that stuff happens in canvassing. But I've led recounts in the state of Wisconsin and around the country. I can tell you that the time for fraud and affidavit, and that is during the recount, when you petition the court and you start pulling ballots out of the boxes.
But Reince, could we go back to Arizona for a second? You said something that'd be psychologically helpful to the campaign, but what difference would it make? Because let's say Donald Trump gets Arizona, he still doesn't have enough if Joe Biden, as the way it's looking, gets Pennsylvania and Georgia. That puts him well over the 270 mark. So what difference would it make?
Well, I mean, it makes a difference in that, number one, winning a recount and court cases in 3 states is obviously harder than in 2. Secondly, I think if you put Arizona back on the map, then you need to make sure that the closer races, at least as we sit here now, I don't know how it's going to look in 12 hours, but the closer races in Georgia and Pennsylvania, still counting ballots, still proceeding, I think are opportunities for the campaign. And so that's the whole point. I think getting some sort of ray of sunshine here by reversing Arizona, I think, would be a psychological lift.
Okay, I see.
And that's an interesting point, and that perspective is reflecting what the White House is saying. If it's that narrow of a margin in Arizona, if it's still a narrow margin in Pennsylvania, and certainly is in Georgia because it's within recount range in Georgia at this hour. The president said something really interesting on the day of the election when he addressed his campaign team. He said, losing is hard for him. Do you think anyone has spoken with the president about, or had a conversation with the president about what happens if he loses?
Uh, I don't know about that. I think the mindset now is to keep thinking about winning until the time comes that, it isn't. But I think their view is, and the campaign's view is that they're going to get Arizona back on track, and then they're going to fight it out in Georgia and Pennsylvania. And let me remind you, I know you know this, and it's that in 2016, when I was heading up the RNC, we were conducting and paying for recounts in 4 states across the country in November and December that Hillary Clinton's campaign launched. So this isn't like sour grapes or some kind of untoward activity. This is what campaigns do when you have really, really close races. They go to canvass, they recount, and the process plays out. I mean, that's what campaigns do, especially in now, 2020 and where we are today.
Hey, Reince, it's Nancy Cordes. I hear what you're saying, that campaigns ask for recounts all the time. But what they don't do is they don't say that the voting is illegitimate. They don't say that the votes that aren't for them or the votes that came in late are somehow illegal. You would agree, right?
Well, I've said things like that many times. So I think that I have experienced cases of illegal voting, certainly not hundreds of thousands, but you go back in Milwaukee where I'm at, it's a unique place because in 2004, the Milwaukee Police Department put together a 70-page report of voting irregularities and problems in Milwaukee. It wasn't the party, it was the Milwaukee Police Department. I remember a police officer in my law firm where I work handed me a copy of their report. And what they found was it wasn't just illegal activity. It was more of good people trying to do a good job, being overrun with thousands of ballots, signatures all over the place, identification problems, registration problems, vacant lots.
But why would that be more likely to benefit? Sorry to jump in, but why would that be more likely to benefit Joe Biden versus Donald Trump if there are clerical errors here and there?
Well, I mean, it depends where they're at, and it depends on the motivations. Look, I'm not the one gathering up the affidavits. I mean, my advice to the campaign would be that for anyone that says that there's fraudulent activity going on in my community and I saw it, I'd say, fine, here's an affidavit, swear under oath and penalty and perjury that this happened, give it back to me, and I'll put it together as part of my petition to the court when the recount starts. When I was a lawyer many, many years ago, and we represented Bush in the recount in 2000. You might remember there was a lot of states recounting. It wasn't just Florida. I was the young lawyer that was driving around Wisconsin gathering up affidavits. And that's really where the rubber meets the road. I mean, it's where you separate the accusation from the reality.
And just, Reince, just on that.
That reality doesn't come in the process until after the canvass.
Okay.
And we should revisit just quickly on that Milwaukee police report. They found very little fraud, and they found it didn't sway anything. So it actually was a very thorough investigation that didn't find much there.
Well, it's not. I don't know about that, John. I mean, it was a result of some of the requirements from the Help America Vote Act, which ended up blowing up in the Supreme Court. But it certainly established problems with signatures, voter rolls, registrations. I don't remember every detail of it, John, but I do think it was a landmark report that certainly showed a lot of problems in our elections. I'm not suggesting
Reince, you got to be careful if you don't remember every detail of the report with old John Dickerson.
Well, I don't remember.
This guy's just,
who does remember every detail?
Who just fact-checked a whole book on presidential history. But anyway, no. But look, this is, we appreciate your perspective, Reince. Yeah, I appreciate, and Reince, thank you, because in just laying out the map, you really have reflected, I think, what the view is inside the White House, that they believe they could turn Arizona around and maybe either litigate or try and win a number of votes in Georgia and Pennsylvania, and that certainly is the belief of Republicans, and you have reflected that, and so thank you for joining us.